Exports of pork and beef play an important role in the U.S. hog and cattle markets. We'll put a gauge on how meat exports started in 2024. And will the origin of pork and beef here in the U.S. be clarified by a new rule on product of the USA labels? And finally, let's talk carbon, specifically how Canada is trying to limit carbon emissions with a complicated tax scheme.
Live from a buzzer-beater entry into the show via Farm Journal broadcast, this is AgriTalk. This morning, we'll begin with a conversation with Dan Halstrom from the U.S. Meat Export Federation. Then it's Shaun Haney from RealAgriculture. And later, Kent Bacus from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Directly following the news, Karen Bonert from Farm Journal's Milk. I'm handsome newsman Davis Michelson, and now, the host of AgriTalk, Chip Flory.
Beautiful, baby. Beautiful. You had all four wheels screeching as you went sideways into that parallel park.
I made it.
It was
when
fantastic.
I get in with 8 seconds to spare, I think. Little technical difficulty on the handsome newsman's end here, and but we're here now. And doggone, I'm glad to be here, buddy.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. I am glad that you're here. Welcome to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. That is Davis Michelson.
Yeah.
And we have got a jam-packed show, as Davis just explained.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of topics that we are going to get to today. And one that, Tyson's closing a pork packing plant in Perry, Iowa.
Yes.
9,000 head a day, Davis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure what the final day of operation will be.
I want to say June 29. I thought I had it in here somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you got it in the news? Okay.
Maybe I don't. That might have been in something else.
Well,
I'll find it.
It's 9,000 head a day.
Yeah. Is
what the plant can handle, about 2.2% of, or about 2% of daily kill. And what Tyson is saying is, quote, this is according to Reuters, while this decision was not easy, it emphasizes our focus to optimize the efficiency of our operations to best serve our customers. Tyson's pork business had an adjusted operating loss of $128 million in fiscal year that ended on September 30, down from income of $198 million the previous year. It said sales volume fell 2.2%, while average prices slid 7.9%. One of the things that I'm hearing is that it's such a big plant that it's difficult to put another shift on. So if you can't put another shift in place at this plant, then it's better shut down than running. I don't know. I'm having difficulty getting this all put together in my head, but we're going to continue to work on that story as the week goes on.
June 28th is that date you're looking for? June 28th. Yep.
Okay,
that's
thank
the
you.
Close date.
Thank you. All right, what else you got?
Yeah, man, I got the National Weather Service outlook. One more day of unsettled weather across the PNW in Northern California. Mountain snow is spreading into the northern and central Rockies today. Fire danger across the southern high plains, followed by a chance of severe thunderstorms across the north central plains later today. Rain may change over to wet snow in the northern high plains. Anomalously warm temperatures to expand eastward from the upper Midwest into the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast through tomorrow.
I don't know if you saw this or not, but it sounds like there's a cyclone about to hit Kansas City again, too.
Yeah, I hear that. A series of cyclones.
Another cyclone championship is about to hit Kansas City tonight at 8 o'clock Central.
I can't comment on that.
Okay.
In February 2024, the annual inflation rate in the United States slightly increased to 3.2%, up from 3.1% in January, which surpassed the anticipated 3.1% forecast. The increase was mainly driven by higher prices for shelter and gasoline, which accounted for more than 60% of the overall monthly rise in prices. U.S. importers are facing a new wave of uncertainty as the possibility of a walkout at East Coast and Gulf Coast ports looms even before formal contract negotiations with dock workers begin. The Federal Aviation Administration conducted a 6-week audit of Boeing and a major supplier following an incident involving an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 flight where a door panel flew off in January. The audit revealed dozens of problems at Boeing and its supplier.
Boeing's got a problem. Boeing has got a problem right now dealing with all of these issues. Yeah.
Speaking of got a problem, ADM reported lower than expected fourth quarter earnings on Tuesday after an investigation into accounting practices at the company's nutrition unit delayed the release of its financial results for nearly 2 months. The United States produced an average of 12.9 million barrels per day of crude oil in 2023, well above the prior record in 2019, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. That's the 6th straight year that the U.S. has led global oil production, and EIA pointed out no other country currently has the capacity to exceed the new record. USDA has finalized rules regarding the use of Product of USA and Made in USA labels for meat, poultry, and egg products. This rule clarifies conditions for making voluntary origin claims and adjusts the use of flags to designate origin. The requirements will take effect on January 1st, 2026.
Yeah, we got Kent coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Well, the recent escalation between Ukraine and Russia saw significant development as Ukrainian drones struck several regions across Russia, marking one of the most extensive attacks attributed to Kyiv in recent times. Let's end it there.
All right, yeah. Actually, Kent Bacus is coming up at the end of the show. We'll talk about the Product of the USA label at that time. Thanks, Davis. Let's bring in Karen Bonert, editor of Farm Journal's Milk. Good morning, Karen.
Hello, Chip.
Hey, animal ag's been targeted as a source of GHG emissions that could be reduced. What are dairies doing to get a better understanding of what they can do to reduce those emissions?
Well, yeah, I think that there's a lot of advancements that's happening when it comes to technology, and the back end of the cow is no exception. I mean, they're advancing these through the digesters, and so many digesters are happening out west in California, and really here in the Midwest too, Chip. But I would say on technology, on beyond just the emissions, on what they're doing is just the impact that technologies has on dairies, from robots to cow sensors. Cameras. It really helps us understand the cow's behavior, their health, the milk quality. I could go on. And of course, labor efficiency comes to mind, whether it's, again, dealing with digesters or anything else in between. And a lot of producers lean into the conversation. But, when it comes to the current milk price, it's hard to really think about making investments, especially when it's going to come to a digester. But Chip, what I would say is that having these conversations costs nothing. So it's essential to bring people to your farm, get these leaders, if you will, around the table to help evaluate that technology's ROI. And because it's complicated, right? It's not all just about more pounds of milk. It's about a healthier cow, a healthier environment. There's so many variables. So, I think when it comes to dairies and when you think of technology, man, the advancements that we have made are pretty incredible. And RNG and carbon and the digesters, they're exploding across the country.
Yep. Yeah. And if the conversations aren't happening, we're not figuring out what really works and works best for the process going forward. So conversations have got to happen. Good stuff, Karen. Thank you.
Thanks, Chip.
That is Karen Bonert, editor of Farm Journal's Milk. Make sure that you get more on this story. www.dairyherd.com. All right. Beef and pork exports off to a good start in 2024. Dan Halstrom, USMEF, is next.
AgriTalk is brought to you by John Deere. For generations before and generations to come, John Deere is part of your farm and your family. Whatever your technology needs, John Deere has the tools to help grow your farm.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. Glad that you are with us on this Tuesday morning. A lot going on out there. We got some updated numbers from CONAB we'll be talking about this afternoon when it comes to Brazilian corn and soybean production. But as a matter of fact, we'll get to it here in just a little bit with Brian Grady at the bottom of the hour. Davis, beans are 14, 15 cents higher here this morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the look of that.
Yeah.
I hope we can hold on is the thing.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. Mid-morning gains of 14, 15 cents don't mean anything if you can't hold on to them.
They make me nervous. I'll be honest. Get me past the noon hour. We'll be fine.
Okay.
Then I can breathe.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Dan Halstrom is the president and CEO of the U.S. Meat Export Federation. He joins us right now. Dan, it's great to speak with you again. How are you?
I'm great, Chip. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad that you are here. I want to take a look at how we're starting 2024 with meat exports. But first, I think we need to put a wrap on what was really a good year in 2023, right?
Definitely, yeah. On the pork side in 2023, we ended up the year with a record value exported, just a slight record over the previous one. But the theme on pork has been broad-based growth across many markets, and on beef, while we were down on the volume, the value result was still the third largest year ever for exports for beef, and quite frankly, especially on beef, the very end of the year, the last quarter, we saw some momentum gaining, and that continued into January. So, yeah. 2023 ended up being a fairly good year, and we're looking pretty good going into 2024.
Right. On pork side, back in 2023, Mexico is so important. So is China. And to have a good year, you've got to have demand from the big markets. And that was there, especially from Mexico in 2023, wasn't it?
Without a doubt. We set a record in Mexico for the year in October. So yeah, that's a function of really all of the different segments in Mexico hitting on all cylinders. It was the demand for pork, like hams, for raw material for further processing as an ingredient. It was demand from retail and demand from food service. And food service through most of last year was booming in Mexico. And you add all that up, and it's a pretty solid performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Mexican market is so important for the hams. You want to talk about adding value to a carcass? That the hams during much of the year could be dragging the carcass value down, but because Mexico is there to import as much as they do, hams often lift the value of that carcass. Dan, that's how important it is.
Well, without a doubt, and there was a period last year where the hams had quite a bit of a swing in the value side. I mean, they were 80 cents a pound much of the year, but they went up to $1.05, $1.10, and honestly, the demand side didn't miss a beat. They just followed the market and probably contributed greatly to increasing the market. So that's the good news on hams. But honestly, Mexico is a much bigger story than just hams. We're starting to see, some of the primal cuts, loins, for example, are becoming a much bigger item down there. And quite frankly, we need all the help we can get on loins.
Yeah.
And then you got variety meats. So, Mexico is one of those markets that's really on the pork side taking, almost the entire carcass.
Yeah. Okay. Good. You mentioned a lot of the trends that we saw on beef in 2023. Was there any one market that really stood out and made you say, wow, look what's happening on beef trade into that country?
Yeah, there was. And it was, once again, it was Mexico. And I would say the second one was Central American region. Those boomed on the pork side, both of them, Central America as well. And the beef was similar. I mean, we finished the year, it wasn't a record, but it was a pretty big increase over the prior year with higher prices. So, I think Mexico and Central America last year were kind of the, I don't want to say unexpected surprise, but a much appreciated surprise because once again, markets go up, markets go down, and they were in there buying the entire year last year. So that's pretty encouraging.
Yeah. Well, whenever you can attach the word surprise to export demand, that's a positive. So we'll take it. We'll take it for sure.
Right.
So, okay, let's talk about 2024. Pork, the January numbers are in, and pork had a good, strong start.
They sure did. Yeah, we were a little over 251,000 tons, growth of 6%. above last year. Same trend lines. Mexico, the leader, Central America right there with them. But there's some other markets that stood out as well. And the big one I wanted to talk about was Korea. Korea did almost 21,000 tons, 53% growth over last year, and 51% growth on the value side in Korea. We'd been hearing from the trade and from our office that activity had picked up late last year, and we're finally seeing it in the numbers. A big increase for the month of January. And once again, it's quite a few different cuts that are involved. It's not just the shoulders, but it's variety meats and other things as well. So that was encouraging. Japan was encouraging as well. The market was steady, but a relatively high number from a year ago. So, I think we can attribute part of this rebound on the pork side, and we haven't gotten to beef yet, but beef is similar on the Korean situation, partly a rebound in the food service area, which is much needed.
Okay. So connect those dots between the surge in pork exports to beef, because beef exports volume down a bit to start the year, but value up a bit to start the year, continues a trend that we saw in 23, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think the takeaway I have, it's a good month on beef especially for a January. You're basically steady on the volume, but the value is up 9%. That tells me that these, even though supplies are down, and which is a negative, we know supply is down, but the fact that the value is up tells me that the biggest question with these customers internationally, especially these big established markets, is, not so much why is the price higher, but when will we have more volume? Because they need it, and they know the value of it, and they're willing to pay for it. So, to me, that in a whole scheme of things, that is a good discussion to have. They understand economics. They understand it'll take a bit of time to rebuild the herd. And I think you're in a pretty good place when that's the discussion versus just hey, the price is too high. We're not hearing that in a lot of markets. We're hearing a much more positive spin on the situation on beef.
Okay. Excellent. Talk to me about market development. Where's the focus in 2024? And you know what? I'm not going to leave it general. I'm going to talk. I want to hear what's going on in Africa, because some of those African countries, it seems like there's so much potential there, Dan.
Yeah, there's no doubt. When you're talking about emerging economies and developing new regions or relatively new regions, Africa is definitely one of them. Southeast Asia is probably another. I think we're getting very aggressive this year in our work to get more boots on the ground in Africa. We are in the process of hiring a French-speaking person to represent us in West Africa, for example. Matt, who runs Africa, is based in South Africa. And then hopefully later in the year, adding more staff in the south central cone of Africa and for the markets of Angola and Congo, for example. So that is the strategy to get more boots on the ground, get a little more exposure into the main, we think the primary regions that can import beef and pork, although it's primarily beef at the moment. And you're right. The signs of potential are enormous when you're talking about Africa. You've got a very young demographic. You've got a middle class that's expanding every year. There's a lot of positives out there. The thing that we're struggling with, and this isn't necessarily a negative, is the supply chain is not well established. That's typical of an emerging new market. So we're working not only in market, but we're working with our exporters here to try to expedite that development of the supply chain. So a lot of good things going on in Africa.
Yeah, develop the market, and I should say not only develop the market, but help them understand the best way to move that product around the country and to get it to the outlets is pretty important stuff. Dan, I always enjoy the conversations and learning more about beef and pork trade. Thank you so much.
Chip, our pleasure. Thank you.
Dan Halstrom, President and CEO, USMEF.
Time for Markets Now with the experts from Pro Farmer.
All right, joining us now, Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady. Beej, I know that you're going to be with us this afternoon on the show for the full show, but don't hold anything back here. What's going on in this bean market?
Yeah, pretty solid day of gains so far this morning, Chip. Double-digit gains, anywhere from about 12 to 15 cents or so here at mid-morning. CONAB, they cut the Brazilian soybean crop estimate. So while USDA continues to just take minor reductions to its Brazilian crop estimate, CONAB, the Brazilian equivalency of USDA, made a pretty major cut this morning, down 2.5 million tons to 146.9 million tons. And that's about the average of the very wide range of estimates coming out of Brazil. And so that's having an impact and triggering some corrective buying in soybeans this morning.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Soybean meal is helping out there, and soybean oil is as well. So everything's pointing to the upside. Spillover support in corn?
Yeah, so CONAB also trimmed its Brazilian corn crop estimate, 943,000 metric tons to 112.8 million tons. Corn is probably getting more support, honestly, from the double-digit gains in soybeans that I talked about, and just mild gains so far in corn, up about a penny or so here at mid-morning.
All right, yesterday's losses turned into gains in the cattle complex. What's happening?
Yeah, moderate to strong gains across feeders and live cattle futures. And so last week's average cash cattle price jumped to the highest since late October of last year. Anticipating we'll see higher prices again this week. And then mixed trade so far, with the front end of hog futures trading to the upside and deferred futures under a little bit of pressure.
We've got Brian on this afternoon with us as well, Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady.
Opinions expressed on AgriTalk do not necessarily reflect the views of Farm Journal Broadcasting, affiliate stations, or sponsors. Knowledge is power. We're here to charge your batteries. AgriTalk.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm Chip. Glad you're with us. We've got some news coming out of Canada from Statistics Canada with the acreage intentions for 2024. Helping us get a better understanding of what is going on there. Shaun Haney, Real Agriculture, Real Ag Radio, on Tuesday assignment. What do you make of that, dude?
This is amazing. This is great. Midweek edition.
That's right. That's right. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing really good. I'm feeling the stress, Chip, of like having to fill up my bracket here in about a week, and thinking about that. And I still have in my head your little comment about don't count out the cyclones. So I got to be disciplined there. So this is a great time of year for sports.
Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. And good grief, that Big 12 tournament that's going to wrap up by Sunday. Oh my gosh, the men's tournament is going to be fantastic. The women's tournament has been fantastic, if you're a Cyclone fan to this point anyway. So
no, a lot of people are saying there's more hype or vibe to the women's tournament this year than actually the guys tournament.
Yeah.
Which is really fascinating. If we have like a Iowa,
and it went chalk.
Yeah. It's going to be fun. Like, can you imagine a Final Four like LSU, Iowa, South Carolina, and like USC in the women?
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing.
It will be. It absolutely will be, no doubt. All right, let's get to Statistics Canada and the acreage intentions that were released yesterday morning. What did you learn?
Well, I think a lot of analysts would say it kind of fell in line. So the two main crops that people are paying attention to is what happens with spring wheat and what happens with canola. They are the acreage leaders. Spring wheat's forecasted to be down 1.2% to 19.2 million acres, and canola is forecast to be down 3.1% to 21.3 million acres. My take on this is I think the canola number has a little bit more chance to slide lower. And that's talking to seed companies. Sales are not moving like they thought. Now, do I think it's going to be a significant drop where we have like a 19 handle on it? No. but I won't be surprised if it drops below that 21 million. And I just it feels that way based on the dry bias in parts of Saskatchewan and really southern Alberta, where the southern Alberta where I am, 5 to 6 years have been what you would call drought conditions. The other thing, Chip, is some of the what I would call more of the fringe crops, like chickpeas, up 26.8%. Okay, that's a drought crop. Oats, not a drought crop, but acres last year swung huge to the downside. Now we're swinging back up 21.6% to 3 million acres. So on those fringe acres, farmers are willing to try out some other crops if they're going to reduce their spring wheat and canola acres.
Well, we've been wondering if that wouldn't be the case in North Dakota this year too, and I wonder if the Canadian numbers aren't maybe showing us that that possibility is real for North Dakota for 2024 too. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. Added into the North Dakota situation for sure, obviously, is you got corn and beans playing into that equation, which definitely impacts that canola and spring wheat number in that state for sure. But if you're in Montana and North Dakota, especially Montana, the chickpea acre, I haven't kind of looked at some of the forecasts, but I would expect the chickpea number in Montana to also have the same kind of increase because also fits those dry conditions.
Right. Gotcha. Anything market moving in either the numbers that we got or in some of those potential changes that you were talking about, the canola acres in particular?
Yeah, I like the green on the screen today.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's good to see. It feels a little bit different compared to what we've been seeing. I don't know if it's really moving the market, but last week in a couple speeches, similar to what you've probably heard in the U.S. On say corn, for example, farmers telling me at today's canola price, I can't pencil a profit.
Okay.
High risk crop, really dependent on nutrients, really dependent on Mother Nature really cooperating, not really a drought resistant crop. Yeah. But, related to the markets, if we did see, because of an expected reduction in acre, if we did see canola rally into spring to a certain extent, it would bring some people back. Okay. But there's a lot of unsold 23 canola out there that people are still trying to market, right? Which is we've been talking
23
last
product
Friday.
is
That's a challenge.
Yeah, 23 product is a problem in a lot of markets right now. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to switch gears on you, like hard. Switch
Go for
gears. And as I was out at different events this winter, it's a few times Canadians would come up to me because we'd have a conversation about carbon emissions and carbon programs and so on. And they'd say, hey, sometime you got to get Haney on to talk about the carbon taxes that we're dealing with up in Canada and explain the costs of those carbon taxes. Can you do that? Is it something that can be explained?
Well, the idea is, in theory, a lot of economists will say this is, having a price on carbon or having a price on pollution is a very efficient way to deter people to other options. Okay. So instead of maybe, having that gasoline powered vehicle, you instead have an electric vehicle, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. In practice though, it's going over like a lead balloon. Yeah. And we've seen this lead balloon keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we've seen the Liberal Party face major challenges in their popularity. If an election was called today, they're going to get smoked by the Conservatives. And a lot of this is all to do with people being very concerned about affordability. And, when people have when affordability is not a concern, things like the environment, and I'm willing to pay a carbon tax, that, saving the environment's important. Yeah. When money's a little bit tighter and trying to put food on the table and, things are getting more expensive, it's like, well, you know what? not as important as it once was.
Right.
And it's been very expensive, and Canadians are definitely speaking at this point with their voting intentions as you look at some of the polls.
How expensive is it?
Oh, it's by 2030, it is supposed to get to $170 a ton. What are we now? We're like I think at 80, I think.
Okay.
I can't remember what exactly.
But
I know we're supposed to.
I had one person tell me that it's 13% on everything that you guys purchase. 13% just to pay the transportation of any groceries and so on. That you add 13% for the carbon on that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the good.
Okay.
But what is frustrating is there's also GST on top of that. So there's a goods and service tax of whatever that is, 5% on top of the carbon tax you already. So you could see how there's like a tax on a tax.
Yeah.
And this has people very frustrated. And think about it from a grain drying perspective. And I've heard a whole bunch of numbers from farmers. So I don't know if I can put a percentage on it, but you think for every bushel you're drying of your corn, you're paying a tax on top of that. Even though there's no other thing that you can, no other way to power your grain dryer besides propane and natural gas. Yeah. And so my advice or my thought is to, the AgriTalk audience is this is something you definitely do not want in the United States. And our system's a little bit different as the parliamentary system compared to what is in the US. Thank goodness. You should thank your lucky stars that the government has tried to find other ways to deal with environmental concerns or climate change or however you want to put that, other than putting a price on pollution.
Right.
Because it is, Europe has gone this way, Canada has gone this way, and the most confusing piece of it, Chip, is that as a regular consumer, a citizen, you actually get money back. And so it just feels like kind of like a wealth transfer. It's like everybody, you pay based on your usage, and then people get money back as kind of like a reward. It's a really, really goofy system that the current government is trying to rebrand, but good luck.
Holy smokes. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. We've got Kent Bacus from National Cattlemen's Beef Association coming up next here with thoughts on product of the USA labeling, the final rule that was out. Give me about 30, 40 seconds on it. What's the immediate reaction in Canada?
I said this on Friday. As soon as I saw that Vilsack was speaking at the NFU meeting, this seemed, I kind of thought they would go with the final rule as they had presented to OMB. Right. I think Canada's going to wait and see. It's supposed to be voluntary. Will Packers go forward with the product USA label because they don't want to segregate cattle either.
Right.
Canada does reserve the right to retaliate through the WTO from MCOOL. If this is in any way moves to where it's presented as voluntary, but it's really mandatory, we're going to see some trade tension between Canada and the U.S. on this. And think about if you're a feed yard in the southern U.S. pulling feeder cattle out of Mexico. Right. You got to be super concerned. This is one of the most restrictive labels at this point, really, in the world in the livestock industry.
Yep. Yeah. And we're going to find out exactly what is in the label, but that animal is going to be born, bred, raised, processed in the U.S. if it's going to carry that label. Haney, you're the best. Thanks, buddy.
Hey, thanks a lot, Chip. Appreciate it.
Yep. Shaun Haney, Real Agriculture, Real Ag Radio. We've got Kent Bacus next.
AgriTalk is brought to you by ESN. Don't risk your nitrogen investment. ESN is designed to beat the 5 ROI killers and provide season-long end to your crop. Learn how ESN works at smartnitrogen.com.
Welcome back. I'm Chip. Glad you're with us. We got a final rule from USDA yesterday that the cattle industry in particular has been waiting for quite some time. It was made at the National Farmers Union National Convention, I believe it was. And USDA Secretary Vilsack released the fact that the final rule on the quote product of USA label has been released. The final rule is now in place. Kent Bacus is the executive director of government affairs for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. He joins us right now to fill us in. Kent, it's great to speak with you again, sir.
Yeah, it's good to talk with you as well.
All right. So the final rule on product of the USA label. What will that product of the USA label tell consumers about what is in the package?
Well, I think, based on what USDA has rolled out in this final rule, there are a couple of different conditions, different scenarios we could see. Okay. But specifically, if a retailer wants to use the claim product of USA or made in the USA, or if they want to use like the US flag or anything else like that, then that means that this has to come from an animal that was born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the U.S. So that applies to single ingredient FSIS regulated goods, so think steaks, but also the multi-ingredient regulated products, so ground beef. So when you're going to use those two specific claims, then you have to meet all those criteria. There's also another condition on that, if you're going to use what's referred to as a qualified claim, then you have to be able to document that. So in that scenario, it could be, it could just be processed in the U.S. or it could be raised and processed. So there are some other things like that we still have questions on when it really comes to implementing this. Those same standards will also apply to those voluntary claims. So if you're going to market like product of Montana or product of Oklahoma, something like that, then you would also have to meet those same kind of verification things as you would under that, with those other conditions. So there's still some questions on paperwork and documentation of what all that would apply. But those are really the two main themes. And this applies to the domestic market. When you look at our export products, which are a very important part of our overall, return on investment, export products, they simply have to comply with the requirements of the export country. So This is a domestic-facing rule. Exports USDA says are not really going to be affected by it, but there's a lot to unpack in this. There's over 120 pages worth of information to look through. So we're really trying to dig into that now and see what kind of opportunities are there for producers, but also what potential cost could come with this.
Right. Okay. You said something that I hoped you wouldn't say, and that is we still have questions on this. That's not what that's not what we want to hear when the final rule has been released. And I understand that we got to get into the details of it, and hopefully the answers are all in there, right?
Well, I think that's the case. I think USDA has put a framework in place, but there's still a lot of conversations of how the industry will comply with this, or because it's a voluntary label, if it is used, if these are used going forward. We have a very diverse supply chain. So I think for some producers, this could be an opportunity, and for others, and for some retailers, they may choose not to go down this road. It's still really early to see how that's going to happen. And keep in mind, the implementation date for this is January 1st, 2026. Yeah. So we still have quite a long window there for these conversations to happen up and down the supply chain. So it's kind of hard to predict whether things are going to whether everything's going to be compliant, or whether we can just kind of plug and play on this until we have those conversations up and down the chain.
Right. Okay. And it's a voluntary use. Have you seen any indications, Kent, from the market participants on how widely the label might be used? I mean, I got to believe that if steaks in a package qualify for that product of the U.S. label, that the label's going to be on there, right?
Well, I mean, we'll see. if you look at it, I mean, it's kind of hard to really gauge consumer demand. And I know USDA had a report that came with that, and they really cite that heavily in this final rule. But keep in mind, the Product of USA label, the threshold's been so low on that for the last several years that really this created an issue where retailers, packers could just use this when, essentially whenever they wanted to, without much clarification on it. Yeah. I don't know what the extent of that will be now. We still have to see how consumers are going to respond to this. I think initially you'll probably see some opportunities there, but keep in mind, consumers have really been responding to a lot of the local and regional marketing efforts ever since COVID, and you had a lot of direct-to-consumer sales. You've seen an emergence there. So consumers are really interested in knowing these things. But when you're talking about a national marketing system, I think we still have a lot to learn.
Yeah. It seems to me that the smaller the regional processors, as long as they can prove the origin of the cattle to begin with, are going to be most interested in using this label, right?
Right, and I think a lot of them can, and that's really what they're leaning on. So
exactly,
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and good for them. Good for them. It's we need all the competition we can get out there in the industry. Kent, great conversation. Thank you so much for the details. I'm sure we're going to talk more about this between now and implementation. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right, Kent Bacus. He is the Executive Director, Government Affairs, National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Hey, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're going to have a great market conversation this afternoon. We've got Brian Grady, editor of Pro Farmer. Tomorrow morning, a Farmer Forum right here on AgriTalk.
International Harvester.